Hi, my name is Jamie Lynch, and you are listening to Eating Habits, my podcast about everything restaurants. I will explore the human element of the hospitality business, and I'll talk to the who's who in restaurants, explore their stories, and hear what's on their minds in the ever-changing landscape of the food and beverage industry.
Hey, this is Sammy Koenigsberg. You're listening to Eating Habits.
I pronounced your name wrong. Have I been doing that all this time?
How do you pronounce it?
Koenigsberg.
Yeah, that's wrong.
I think you pronounce it wrong. I think you're the only person that pronounces it.
I don't really know how to pronounce it, so I don't bust anybody for it.
I love
but
it.
I'll bust you.
Oh, that's fine. I deserve it.
I've always been offended, Jamie.
All right, so I'm here with Sammy. All right, so the reason I asked you to be on Eating Habits, Sammy, is that you have been an immense inspiration for me in my kind of culinary journey here in Charlotte. You've been a mentor when I started my farm. I mean, I don't think Corey and I would have been close to getting crops out of the ground had we not got some guidance from you. So I wanted to get you on here to talk with our listeners about this idea of where your food comes from and why that's important to you, why you do what you do, how you got started in all this, and then just kind of explore that a little bit.
Okay. Which one of those?
So how'd you get started in it? Like, why farming? I mean, you weren't always a farmer. You didn't come from a farming background, correct?
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in Charlotte, and I was educated in a college prep school, and farming was anywhere in the picture, in my mind, anything. Some early influences, I really loved growing things with my dad and growing tomato plants at a young age. And then, when I was a teenager, I grew some other things that I was really excited about.
Ooh,
a little dirt.
I don't think I'd heard this story.
You're the first. I debuted it here.
Tell me more.
That's enough.
Okay, got it. I think we all understand. Very good.
But, the whole part of that is that I didn't care much about consuming these products I was growing. I was more into growing them. I just loved watching that process. That coupled with another early influence was my uncle. He was a naturopathic physician, and he began talking to me when I was at a very young age about sort of some of the things that were going on with our food, how our food was being raised. I later called it behind the veil, because one of my biggest soapboxes that we can talk about through the years has been our removal from our food and all the problems that causes. And so he began to illuminate that, confinement, factory farming, and pesticides and soil erosion and all that. And it just piqued my interest. I was always interested in health and eating, and I spent 7 years as a vegetarian. But farming wasn't anything I ever thought about really until later. I think some of the big turning points were I went to college to study architecture and got an architecture degree. While there, we had a semester-long project to design a farmer's market of all things, which, as I would later do in real life, but during that semester-long project, I read Wendell Berry's The Unsettling of America, and just had an enormous influence on me, and it just spoke so much to what I had always felt was wrong. And I worked so hard on that project, and I really felt called to do something about these problems. I didn't know what. A brief note to say that, I got into architecture because at some point, the nature, the creation is how I like to refer to it. It began to touch me deeply in my life, and I began to see the importance of it. And then architecture was sort of how can man interact with the creation without destroying it and damaging it, which is what was so troubling to me, and I wanted to do something to help that.
So you kind of had this sustainable kind of seed or root.
Exactly.
Like somewhere it seems like it kind of was always there, right? And then like you're, through your experiences, learning about the medicinal like stuff, and then the fascination with the creation and how we can not mess that up. I mean, it seems like there's this sustainable kind of line that runs through all of that stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, when you look back and you put it all together, it does.
Gotcha.
And then when I graduated from school, I became very ill, and it was that was probably the biggest turning point. I got arthritis in my hands and in my upper spine. I couldn't sit over a drafting table. It was the other part of my architecture was I wanted to build, design, and build, and I couldn't really do that. One thing I could do was get out and work in a garden. And my grandfather, on my wife, I was married and had one child at the time, gave us a tiller. And so we were living out near the UNC Charlotte, and we tilled up a big garden. And I loved it. It was good for me physically to get out and work, to sweat, and then to have the good food. This illness went on for a long time. It was one of those things that they had no cure for. They kind of did all the tests and wanted to just throw some antidepressants at it. And about that time, my dad said, I'm going to sell the farm, which is the piece of property we're on now. It's 50 acres just south of Charlotte and Waxhaw. And it was just a piece of land we grew up on, just coming out here and messing around, riding horses. We didn't live here until much later.
Did your father live here at the time?
He did.
Yeah.
He was divorced and had a house here with
Right.
his second wife. I spent junior and senior year living here, but it was just it was just deep in my soul, part of that sustainable thing that was in me, this love and this care for land was just something there. So here we were, sick with one child, and my dad said he's selling the property unless we're interested. I was growing a garden, so I said, well, okay, we want to move out, and we're thinking about starting a little farming business, just to help until I get better. I could grow good food that, there was no medicine for it. And so that time I was already engaged into food as medicine. So
Yep.
that was 1990 and we got started.
Nice. Had you been planning this farming business for a while, or was it just something that kind of made sense because you couldn't do the work that you trained in school for? You had some property available. I mean, there wasn't a farmer's market at that point, right? In 1990, was there?
No, it was, organic was not. Nobody even really knew what that was. There was so the only markets for it in Charlotte were small little 60s style health food stores.
Yeah.
So I think the lifestyle of farming was attractive to me. I knew it was something I could do since I couldn't do what I trained to do. And we had this land. And on this land was a tractor, a greenhouse, a bobcat, front end loader, and open land, so like everything we needed to get started.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had read a book by Elliot Coleman called The New Organic Grower. And he was really inspirational, and what I would say would be like the second back to the land movement that produced the farmers market movement that we're all surrounding today. And his book was sort of the seminal work in that, and it was basically like a how-to book.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gave me the vision that you can do this,
Yeah.
and gave me the tools to begin. There was no internet back then, or I certainly didn't have it. So we had books. So we were given a house, and we were given the land, we were given all the equipment, so we didn't have a lot of obstacles that most people have when they get into farming. So we decided to start and see where it would go.
And look where it went. Man, it's got.
Where is it?
Yeah, we were talking about it before we started recording. We were talking about the farmers market, and just this area alone out here in Waxhaw is like blown up. I mean, I remember the first time I came out here after I met you through Mark Martin. is how we met at Ethan's restaurant. I think that was probably in 2002, maybe
Yes.
something like that.
Some of
It
the
was
best
20 years
meals
ago.
I've ever had in my life.
Yeah,
We still talk about it.
He was great.
You helped.
Yeah, I helped.
Yeah.
But so and I've talked about this in many episodes that or interviews that I've given is cooking in New York and at the pedigree that I kind of worked in, we always had the best ingredients available to us. Price wasn't an option. We could buy from anywhere in the world. We could ship stuff from Asia and anywhere. And meeting you at Ethan's and being introduced to you through Mark was the first time that I actually met the farmer growing the food. And that was an integral moment for me in my development as a chef, because your vegetables were amazing. I mean, beautiful, like as close to perfect as I've seen, right? Just everything was like picture book, like what a vegetable should be, right? Like a radish, they were like, the skins were bright and they were like perfectly round. And they had these beautiful green tops that weren't wilted and brown and gnarly. And I just remember like seeing this stuff and being like, whoa. And it still had dirt on it because you didn't, like it had some dirt on it. And I was like, wow, okay, cool. This is amazing. And you had invited me out to the farm. You were like, I don't know if you'd seen something or whatever, but you were very gracious about saying, hey, if you want to come out and see what we do, come see what we do.
Yeah.
All right. I'll be out there. I think I came out like the next week and just showed up, was like, all right.
How old were you then, would you say?
I think I was probably maybe 28, 30, 28.
Okay.
Yeah. 20. Well, let's see. It was 27. I'm 47 now. So that was 20 years ago.
20 years ago. Okay.
Holy smokes.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I came out to the farm and then saw this. I mean, your farm is beautiful. We'll post pictures and stuff up, but it was so well manicured and green and organized. Coming from a kitchen chef's perspective, where I'm very fussy about my mise en place. I need everything in its place, and the salt goes here. Everything, everything's
Right.
very meticulous.
Yeah.
And I definitely saw that on your farm, just like the systems.
Yeah.
But there was this kind of natural beauty to it.
Mhm.
Like it just kind of does what it does too, right? Like there's
Right.
this like, you can't totally control it.
Right.
you
Good
know,
point.
which I want to talk
Thanks,
about a
Jamie.
little bit.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of uncontrolled places today.
But it really resonated with me. And I think it's planted a seed for me to eventually, to really learn about where my food comes from.
Right.
I was so inspired that this stuff was being grown 20 miles from the restaurant.
Yeah.
And I could go see it,
Yeah.
which was something that was new to me.
Right.
And I think a lot of city folk are new, like that idea is new to them.
Yeah.
All right. They're not connected to their food the way that you can be here, which was really inspiring. And then learning a little bit about, I think at that time, your kids were all born. So 20 years ago, your youngest was 2?
He's 18, so
Okay, so he was.
Maybe we had a few more to go yet when we
Yeah.
first met you.
Wow.
Some of those good meals and wine.
Yeah. All right. But I recall this image in my head of like the kids digging up potatoes,
Yeah.
just lined up in the row, digging up these potatoes, and I was like, man, you need to have an army of kids to be able to do this job. What was that experience like for you? Getting the farm up and running, bringing your stuff to market,
Yeah.
and then like kind of becoming this, godfather of organic farming in Charlotte.
Yeah. I never, to go from an architect to farmer in the culture of the 80s was sort of a big downgrade. My mom wasn't telling people at cocktail parties that I was a farmer.
She wasn't stoked.
After paying for my education. Yeah. So yeah, I'd never, and I was just doing something. Basically, it's what I could do, and I also believed in it, and I also felt like the lifestyle would be really good for me, and and I could be on this land every day. I'm kind of an introvert. I do better with plants than being around a lot of people. So it just seemed to fit, and I loved hard work. That's why I wanted to be a design build architect. I knew I couldn't sit at a desk all day. I knew I needed to sweat.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we had one child when we started. As I said before, organic wasn't a household word, and local agriculture wasn't even on the radar. Like, people didn't even, that had not yet even occurred to people. We were still rejoicing in the decentralization and industrial agriculture and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to answer your question, it was quite beautiful to have the things that you know about and care about, and you felt like you were a lone voice crying in the wilderness, to all of a sudden begin to be appreciated by not just a small niche of people that have the time and the intellectual prowess to look into these kind of things and to be able to care about where their food comes from, but from a large, the awareness kind of hit. It was sort of part of the environmental movement. There were several books that were written, like Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma, and that had huge impact and got people really thinking. So there I was, like I'm not the best farmer, I'm just the only one. So I sort of became the spokesmodel for small organic farming in the Charlotte area. So, I was speaking weekly and putting together slideshows, and we even got invited to go to Mexico to present at a festival. That was Bonaparte and Bruce Moffat and I, and Terra Madre in Italy. We were delegates in 2006. And so all this attention, then newspaper articles, all of a sudden my mom was proud I was a farmer.
Right.
So
yeah.
It was...
people were taking notice.
Yeah. And, we started the market. We started a CSA. All those things were successful, relatively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So that was great. It was also exhausting, for an introvert to go on the speaking circuit. I had a lot of panic attacks. And
Did you suffer from that kind of like anxiety from having to be in groups and stuff like that?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit.
I hate
got
talking
through
in
it.
front of large groups.
Yeah. It was, if I knew it had a purpose, I could do it. Yeah.
Right.
So I did it. But yeah, so it was overwhelming. It was great. We're still going,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of, I had given my dad a business plan because I'm on his farm using his stuff, and we've tripled my rosy projections that I didn't even believe in when I gave them to him. So it actually did, it did fairly well considering what it is.
Nice.
We're not ready to start an IPO or anything.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit, because farming's hard work.
Yes.
I think, I associate the seed for me wanting to start Chef Jamie's farm from meeting you and seeing the farm and then getting connected to the foods that we were cooking. And I realized through getting to know you over the years and the market and coming out to the farm that I really did not know anything about the vegetables that I was cooking. I mean, I knew a lot from an everyday person's perspective, but I did not understand the process. I did not understand like why the things happened, how, these beautiful vegetables come to maturity and then nurture us and stuff like that. And that became really fascinating to me. And so I needed to learn more. Like, that's why I wanted to start the farm. It wasn't about making money or being a farmer. It was really about understanding this whole process better. And man, that was a lesson.
You learned.
I learned.
Yeah.
I learned. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that, because there's a lot of variables. Many are in your control. There's a lot of things you can plan for and you can, I guess, strategize for the best you can, but then there's a lot of things like you can't control the weather. That's something that's out of your hands.
Deer.
Deer, you can't control deer.
Yeah.
Maybe here. But like, I don't know that people get it, right? I don't think they understand. And if I don't know if there's a story that you have of maybe a time where you got taken advantage of by one of these unforeseen forces, and kind of how you bounced back, how you dealt with it. Is there do you have anything like that you could share?
Yeah. I like to talk about those things kind of philosophically, and I don't know if but to go back to just to touch on something that I think in your story, that you, and this has always bothered me, that a culinary education has no idea about, or is, I mean, I know some of that's changed, but for the most part, they have no idea of the stuff that comes in boxes in the back door, and yet that's the primary medium of their craft.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you should do a podcast on how that changed for you after farming.
I will. I will as a backup to this interview. I'll do that. That's a good point.
So yeah, over the years we've tried to get a lot of culinary students out here through the different schools that are in Charlotte, and either butchering chickens or working in the garden. But yes, it's hard work, and I believe it needs to be. I believe there's a purpose for that, and it sort of goes to the heart of my personal beliefs. But I feel like it ultimately, it has something to teach us, the sweat, the battle with the weeds, the battle with the weather, the battle with the wildlife, like I wasn't kidding when I said deer. I mean, they wiped out a whole patch of our okra, it's thousands of dollars they did in one night, and no matter what we do, we can't get rid of them, and so, yeah, there's all these forces.
Well, I think you could get rid of them, but you choose not to. I want to touch on that a little bit.
Hell no, I would kill every one of them if I had an AR-15.
Well, I mean,
hate to be, that's the anger part of this, and sometimes these uncontrollable forces, really do make you want to give up.
Yeah,
it's really hard.
Have you had a time where you've wanted to throw in the towel and you know what?
Yeah, last week. Also I'm 60 years old, and I'm.
So you're like, maybe now it's time to give up.
Yeah. So
I'm giving it a good run.
Those things that happen, they feel bigger. The steamroller, is got from a tricycle running over you to a steamroller. But yeah, I think those things ultimately keep us humble. I believe that organic farming in particular is hard because we're not just spraying herbicides. We're not just using chemicals.
Yep.
And I don't see really, there's there's technologies that don't kill, destroy, and poison the earth and our food. And those are all great. And we use as many of those as we can. But it's still hard work. And I think when we try to do end runs around that, like, we pay the price.
Yep.
And
you see that a lot in some of the big commodity farming. I mean, some of those books that you talked about depict some of that kind of,
right.
That monocropping stuff and how dangerous some of that stuff can be.
Right. We have developed systems to control and get rid of a lot of those variables, and they're the systems that launched what's called the Green Revolution, which launched industrial agriculture, which launched the decentralization of agriculture, meaning that all the small farms couldn't make it anymore because they couldn't compete. And so agriculture all moved to a few places in our country, and people could no longer make a living. You remember the Farm Aid concerts and all that stuff. Just it's hard enough as it is, and then you come up under the Goliath of all that. But we're paying a huge price for that, in the future of food, really the future of our species living here on Earth, because we're destroying the ecosystems through. We're basically burning. We're heating the house by burning it down, and so we're paying a price. We're also paying a price in tasteless, nutritionless, food, which is a little more than cellulose balls when it's not grown with the kind of care and attention that really brings forth kind of what those things are meant to be.
Yeah.
And
that's something that I noticed that may have been part of the attraction for me too, to go down my path to learn more about it, was that somewhere along the way, cooking with this food, my cooking got better. Right? To me, the dishes taste better. The food tastes better. I realize as a chef, I don't have to work as hard to make this taste good when it's grown properly. I think there is something, I don't know if this is true. I'm not a scientist. Everybody knows that. But I believe that there is some sort of chemical connection between food that is nutritious and your perception of its flavor. Every time I cook with locally grown fresh stuff that's been out of the ground for a short amount of time, as opposed to something that's been packaged at a grocery store or whatever, it tastes more vibrant. It tastes deeper. The carrots are sweeter. They're earthier. You can almost pick up some of those mineral notes, and it's almost like wines, right? It's like that terroir situation. And I think you're absolutely right that cooking with this type of nutritious, locally grown food is better. It's better for you. It tastes better. Obviously, it's better for the ecology, for nature. The price, I think, is the issue that a lot of people struggle with, right? With organic produce. You look at it in the grocery store, you got your organic section and then your commodity goods, right? And it's a couple dollars more for your organic stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think about, or do you have any thoughts about how we could get this type of food in front of more people?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend that used to say, cheap food is neither, meaning cheap food is it's neither cheap because you're paying a price for it through poisoned water, terrible food, loss of farms in your communities, erosion of soil, which is the biggest problem, and sacrificing the future. So it's not cheap, and
right.
And
it comes at a cost that people can't see.
Right. There's so many hidden costs to cheap food. It's the best way of dealing with that question. And when you start to, in this country and many others, cheap food is subsidized by leaps and bounds. Huge amount of money is pouring into these big agri-farms, and that's linked up with political power, all those things. It's really, food is power. We see that going on right now with in the Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe. I think the reason he wants it is because there's a resource better than oil and better than gold, and that's 5 feet of the best topsoil in the world and lots of it. And we just don't, because we're so disconnected from farming, we don't see the value of that. People don't get it. So how to make it cheaper,
or more accessible, maybe not even cheaper, because I guess I don't want. Because I see the value in it, right? I've done the work and I've learned it, and I've learned it. So I don't think it should be cheaper. But how do we get it more accessible? I guess is a better question.
Right. I think the answer, I don't have the answers to that, and I think it's probably many pronged, and there's a lot of people working on it. Currently there's this beautiful, elegant win-win system called double bucks in the farmers market, where people that are on government support for food, if they shop at a local farmers market, which like Matthews, we do this program there. Their food stamps, or I'm not sure what they call them now, SNAP tokens, are worth double in the farmers market buying local food than they are in the grocery store buying, sodas and crackers. And so,
and this is something that you guys do as you give the double value to those.
No, it's mobilized on local level, but it's being done all over. I think the Charlotte Food Policy Council is
awesome,
raising a lot of the money for that. That I just mentioned that as one part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing is, as agriculture decentralizes, which will happen if, I guess that's kind of the ultimate vision, is that our cities become surrounded by a patchwork of hundreds of farms that support the city. Right now, there's a few places in the country where most of all the salads and things for the restaurants are grown. And so if Hurricane Katrina had hit the Salinas Valley in California, they said that restaurants would be without produce for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yep.
And so that's unsecure, unsustainable, it's dangerous, it's foolish.
Yeah.
And so, but when I can make this teeny bit of money off this 50 acres, or I could sell it for, $90,000 an acre, economically, these places aren't going to remain farms. So, I'm meeting tomorrow with a group that is working on that problem. They're trying to buy farms, put them in easements, and then sell them to farmers that can pay it back within 10 years and still own the property, albeit at an easement cost.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of smart
people
working on it. Yeah, and there's so many different programs. I'm not even aware of half of them. That's the problem when you either be an activist or you farm, or you're an extraordinary person and can do both. So.
Well, I think you've done an awesome job of touching the people, at least in your community, right? I mean, the Matthews Farmers Market is a great example. I mean, you were part of the group. Let's talk about that a little bit. Talk about the formation of the Matthews Farmers Market, because I think that has become a hub now for chefs, for just the community to get connected with their food and to buy great food that is healthy, that is local, supporting the local community. And you were a part of that. So there's some activism there. Obviously, you to support your farm and stuff as well, but that has grown into a hub.
Right.
And so I think that's important.
Yeah.
So how did that all come to be?
Yeah, I'll take that. So when we started, as I mentioned, we only had these small health food stores, and so we needed markets. Mm-hmm. And so we started a CSA that year, which if your audience doesn't know, it's where families buy into the farm and they get a weekly delivery of produce for summer, spring, fall season. So we started that with 13 families. 2 of those were our parents.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And that same year, the town of Matthews came to me and a friend of mine who was on the committee in Matthews. And they said, well, we got this brilliant idea. We want a farmer's market it was a downtown redevelopment committee. Matthews was dying. They were a little antique village. The Harris Teeter had left. So there was really no reason for being for the center of the old town. And it kind of slowly was dying as an antique village. And so they were looking for things to do to make it more alive, to make it viable again. And so they came to us, and my friend Kevin Carpenter and I sort of took the ball and ran with it, and we We spent about, and granted, I had already done the research in school for the farmers market.
Right. So you had already had like, you just pull that old project out and you're like, hey, look what I got.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. We're here for you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the biggest thing about, and we did a lot of studies. We did neighborhood interviews. You know, we met with town council, and we had a great benefactor, a property owner in downtown that owns the 100-year-old hardware store, David Blackley, and he was willing to let us use his land, which was perfectly situated right in the heart of the downtown area. So we saw it was a good thing, but we saw to make it a certain way. So back in that time, farmers markets in the South were not real. They were reseller markets. So basically, you would go down to the big terminal markets in South Carolina, load up your truck, come up, put your straw hat on and your overalls, and act like you were selling stuff from your farm. And that's really how it was. I'm not exaggerating that. It was kind of a masquerade. And so we said, this is going to be a real farmer's market. We're going to put a 50-mile radius on it, and the people selling here have to have grown it themselves, and they have to have grown it within a 50-mile radius. And so with that, it also became then one of these pieces to help make local food, organic food more accessible by helping these farmers to actually be able to make a living and keep going.
Yep.
And so, you know, it's grown into probably one of the best farmers markets in the Southeast. We won Best of Charlotte many years. And, you know, it took a while to get going till awareness built. But
how long would you say that took for the market to kind of take off and become a steady market?
So this was 1990, and it took about, I would say, 8 to 10 years to really get steady. You know, now that the awareness is there and the work's been done and the education's been done and people are appreciative and desirous, it's not as much of a slog.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you guys sell out. I mean, if you want Newtown Farm carrots, you got to get up early. You got to be there before the bell.
Yeah. That sometimes hurts us because sometimes people are like, forget it. I'm not going to get there anyway, so they don't show. But, you know, we were sort of an anchor tenant for a long time, but there's a lot of other great farmers in there. And, you know, the patchwork of all of us together is an incredible attraction.
And the variety.
Yeah.
I mean, the variety at the market now, you know, with mushrooms and like things that like in the early days nobody was even messing around with.
Yeah.
You know, you got Hiram working on that stuff and bringing that to market, which is amazing. There's meats there now.
Yep.
Dairy, which I don't think was there early on, right?
Nope.
So I mean, there's bakeries. I mean, it's like a legit market. I mean, I think it's
really a best of.
Yeah.
You can't get the stuff at Whole Foods. So, you know, it really doesn't. It's not exclusive in that way. I mean, we have a gelato maker that is from Italy that I haven't had anything like what he does. So even on that level, you know,
there's gelato out there now. You guys got ice cream out there? Like, come on, man.
Occasionally.
Yeah. All right, I'll be
He's
out
there.
there.
Now we're going to get you?
You want to get people out there. That's how you do it. Offer them ice cream.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Good sticky buns, too.
No, the people producing out there are amazing. I mean, for me, it's hands down my favorite market to go to. The only drawback for me is the distance. It's a little far from where I live downtown or uptown or wherever we call it.
Yeah, it was sort of, you sort of think this market would have materialized somewhere in Plaza or somewhere where people are more liberal-minded than conservative Matthews, but somehow it worked.
Yeah.
It probably took a lot longer.
Yeah, maybe that's why it took 8 years.
And people drive, yeah.
So I was thinking about, you said something that made me think about the market creating a place where all these people could get together, sell their stuff, and then, you know, farmers could make it.
Right.
I had an experience with Chef Jamie's farm where we actually had to sell it due to the COVID thing.
Right.
And I can see how difficult it is to make it work.
Yeah.
Right. To make it sustainable or viable. Maybe not even sustainable, but viable.
Right.
I think that had the dice rolled a different way, maybe we would still be farming out there. But, just a series of events wiped it out. Had you had experience with anything like that? Any issues where you kind of were backed up against it and really had to consider, would you consider sharing that?
Yeah, I would. All this was given to me, and so I've had the advantages. I've had a lot of advantages. I sought to use them to sort of, this is my nobilization of it anyway. We sought to use those advantages to sort of pioneer a way, with the market, and to be able to endure, the lean years of starting out, because we didn't have the reality of expenses. Even our health insurance was provided, so we had no house payment. So we had all these advantages, and we've continued to, but we're at a point now where just living on the property costs us $40,000 a year because the taxes are out of the roof, and we're at that point now, to where we're looking at we've got to expand the business, and here I am at 60 years old. Okay, you need to do more now. So I'm looking at that going, okay. But we also have my daughter and her husband. He's a chef, and they're both from the hospitality world. And so we're looking at a succession plan with them. So we're sort of in that time now where we're really challenged. Mm-hmm. But I think you hit on a nerve, and it's the biggest nerve for me. And I think there's a lot of people that would love this lifestyle, mm-hmm. and there's huge obstacles from getting into it. And then there's obstacles staying in it. Like, do you want to sweat for 14 hours a day in the summer? And that's what we're doing. Never leave, never go anywhere hardly. And make, $15 an hour. Are you willing to do that? Do you love it that much? But the inability of a small, sustainable farm to be a viable business is the biggest nut to crack. Mm-hmm. And I definitely don't, even with all the success I've had and with the notoriety and all that, I have not cracked it. Mm-hmm. And I'm honest about that because, and we're still working on it, mm-hmm. and I may die trying, but it's the time we find ourselves in history, and these kinds of changes are really hard to make. Mm-hmm. You're steering a really big ship with a lot of inertia, and you're trying to change a system that has so much money and power, and agriculture just keeps consolidating and getting bigger and controlled by fewer and fewer hands. Mm-hmm. And you can never lose hope, and you can never stop.
Right.
And what you do matters. It matters now, and it matters eternally, I believe. Mm-hmm. So, what you're fighting for now, even if you don't think you can win, you will win.
Mm-hmm. Right. What are some of those things that you are planning or thinking about or brainstorming to combat the taxes and all that? I mean, that's all stuff that happened over time, right? It's like property values go up, now your taxes are up, and it's, right. You're maybe not making more, right? Like, you only charge so much for, the economics of it.
Right.
They are what they are, right?
Exactly.
And there's things.
There's a ceiling.
Yeah. And so what are some of the thoughts or ideas that you guys have for keeping up with the inflation and all that kind of stuff on the farm?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. So when I started the farm, there was always a vision that it was more than a farm, and there was always this hospitality component. It may have been a little nebulous at the start, but then it kind of formed. And then, you know me, I love the restaurant business and the food world. And you know, I'm not so sure that the restaurants were ever that big of a component of our business. But I loved the relationship so much. I was so inspired by the dinners I had, like with you and Mark, and through the years with all kinds of people, and seeing what they did with our food, which made me go back to the land and work harder. It made me want to bring a better product to you all. It's like our arts and our crafts sort of intertwined in this thing that sort of elevated both of us. And so I just loved that. I loved the culinary arts. And so I always wanted to combine that. And I think maybe one of the first inspirations, or at least sort of to see somebody doing it, you know, it's been done a lot. But in the early 2000s at Terra Madre, we met Darlena. She has and I'm forgetting the name now, but she has a farm cooking school in Cork, Ireland, and then we met Alice Waters there too, and what she was doing. We met Nora, who's got restaurants in Washington D.C., the first certified organic restaurants in the country, and so all these things were real inspiration for me to somehow bring it back to the farm. Mm-hmm. So that same year, we started taking, you know, doing on-farm dinners, and we did. You've done several here.
We did the Couture wine dinner. That was fun.
Fundraiser for Slow Food.
Yep.
So we did them as fundraisers, but it was all towards learning and trying to see this hospitality side of things develop. So that's sort of what we're trying to formalize, where we opened the farm, which, you know, it's a beautiful spot. It's pretty close to town. And, you know, I haven't done one of those dinners in probably 2 or 3 years. And a week doesn't go by where we don't get an email, people wondering when we're going to do one, more so than, oh, what are you going to have at the market? It's like, when are you doing one of those dinners?
Oh, wow. I think people are hungry for that right now, right? Like this whole pandemic thing has got, you know, there's some sort of atrophy in people's social community thing where they just want to get together. People want, you know, they're craving it.
And outside even better,
yeah,
right?
Totally. In a place like this.
So yeah, to bring all that together, to me, was kind of the most educational way to teach people about this. Slow food had a term, they called it eco-gastronomy. So basically saying that through a plate of food that had both good agriculture, local agriculture, and maybe even small breeds, precious seeds agriculture, combined with really good culinary arts, was a window back to educating people in the best way to understand issues of the soil, to engage them. Because they, you know, like, I've never had anything that tastes like this. What's going on here? Mm-hmm. Tell me, you know. It opens a world of, hey, where's my food coming from? What's, you know, maybe I'll read a few books to find out. Maybe this could help my health problems that seem intractable, you know. So, you know, people coming together to celebrate these blessings of good food, good culinary arts, good agriculture, the beauty of the surroundings right at the place where the food's coming out of the ground. To me, it was like about as close as heaven as you can get, you know. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we hope to do for people.
Awesome.
Yeah. And hopefully it would be a business as well, where we could make enough to stay here.
Yeah, to help offset all those rising costs and stuff.
Yeah.
What's that look like? When can we expect that? I'm excited. I hope that you invite me to do one. Or two or more.
I'll think about it.
Yeah. I know where those potatoes come from. I've planted those potatoes. I know.
You have all the qualifications. You should be first.
Yeah. Well, I'd be happy to. But yeah. So when do you think you might be able to realize some of that?
So we're hoping spring of next year. Keep an eye on our you can get on our mailing list at newtownfarms.com, and you will be the first to know, you know, when our new
You guys sending out a newsletter?
launches.
You guys,
We do. You can sign up. We don't do it maybe twice a year for turkeys or something, but we'll be more regular with them as this develops.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole nother website connected with this work and everything that we're working on. So yeah, it'll, hopefully we'll have a calendar of dinners that you can schedule and come out. And then we hope to do kind of lower price point pizza nights, farm
more
pizza.
like family orientated kind of dinners and things to get.
Yeah.
I think getting the youngsters out here is the key. Like I think a lot of the work, the groundwork's been done a lot in Charlotte, I think, as far as setting up the systems, the markets, the connection with the restaurants and a lot of that stuff. And the youth is the future, right? Like that's the key, right? Is getting access to young people so that they see it as this is where food comes from.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I have a question for you
Hit me.
in regards to that. Is that okay? Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So your generation of chefs, you kind of were weaned during the beginnings of the farm to table movement and rode right through it. I hate to use those terms, but nonetheless, that's what it was. How do you see young chefs coming out of school now? Are they engaged in these issues? Do they care? Or do you think it's just a blip, or are they less engaged? Where do you think that's at?
I think that they're more engaged. However, I don't know if that's because of my proximity to it and because it's important to me. And so it's part of the dialogue and what we do at Fifth Street Group. I mean, we're always searching out the stuff, and it's something that we talk about. And so I'm not sure if it's because they're exposed to it, and it's a part of our conversation that it seems that way to me.
Yeah.
But that said, there's a lot more chefs of my generation that are engaged, right? That have kind of had the awakening, right? Where we've kind of been like, whoa, okay, this is where food comes from, and are trying to push that forward and make it central to what we do in the restaurants, which I feel has to carry over to the next generation.
Because they're growing up under your tutelage, and
and I mean, and that's so much of what I do now, right? Like, it's rare that I'm working the pass at one of the restaurants. I still do it from time to time for fun, just to mess with my team or whatever.
Yeah.
But a lot of what I do now is training my team and coaching my staff and talking about the stuff that inspires what we do and our version of hospitality. So my hope is that will carry over to some of those young chefs and help to keep pushing it.
Neat.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. I think in town there's consolidators now, and I think they're a piece of the puzzle, that they...
I'm actually going to be speaking with Jesse later today.
Okay.
Yep.
So good.
From Fresh List, yeah.
I think he's doing a great job, and I think they're the piece of the puzzle. The one thing that I feel is sacrificed in all that is the relationships, me coming into the kitchen, seeing you, you telling me things look beautiful. I don't know. I hope that kind of thing, that those kind of connections, because I think those are intrinsically valuable, and I think knowing the people, the hands that are digging in the dirt, that are raising the animals, that you can travel to the farm and all that is something that doesn't go away, and that we just, in this consolidation thing, just sort of starts the whole thing all over again, where, the convenience of making one call and before long, everyone's removed again.
There's going to be a balance there for sure.
Farmers are losing because there's a middleman. And anyway, I'm not ragging on Jesse, but I think I really do believe it's an important part of the solution. It's not just, me driving in town with a little truck. It's not going to happen. And there's all sorts of levels of this.
100%.
And he's helped keep farms alive. So
and I think he's also helped make it, easier for chefs to use local farms.
Right.
I know early on for me, it was the difficult part, which we endured and look forward to the challenge, was getting the crop lists each week, placing the orders, and then, you know, planning in like just all of the energy it takes to go through that process.
Right.
Is tough.
Right.
Especially if you have a big restaurant.
Very hard work.
Yeah. And something that I'm dealing with now with the bigger restaurants is when you have a 40-seater, and your your menus are fluid and you can play, like, it's a little easier framework. But in a bigger restaurant, you know, you're stuck inside. That framework is a little more rigid.
Yeah.
And so I think something that those kind of the connectivity and stuff that something like Fresh List brings is it makes it more convenient for a chef to be able to, like, not have to leave the kitchen to be able to do what they do. So there's definitely an important part to play there from the restaurant standpoint. But I agree with you wholeheartedly about the connectivity, because I think that definitely adds value to the relationship and the understanding of what's going on, and where the food's coming from.
Yeah. Which
can carry over to the plate and to the guest.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else you wanna touch on before we we're at an hour? I know you got stuff to grow, and
I'm good if you are.
I'm good for now. If I think of anything else, I'll hit you up, and we'll do once we get closer to
part two.
And I want to get Matt and Noe on here and talk about, because I think you know, luckily I've been able to kind of see Noe grow up on the farm and be a part of that over time, and now you have Matt and the family, and it'll be interesting to get their perspective of.
That would be great.
Yeah. Sammy, thanks for having me out here. It's beautiful.
So good to see you, man.
Good to see you. It's been pre-pandemic, I think.
Yeah,
2
years.
Long. It can't be that long again.
I got my shirt.
I love it. Thank you.
The camera catching that?
there it is. Thanks, buddy.
All right.